Okay, in the last video it was a complete introduction to Cisco Packet Tracer. We're still going to keep this pretty basic, but we're going to get a little bit more in depth. We're going to look at some of the configuration and connectivity to devices such as a switch. So, similar to clicking on the PCs, if we click on the switch, it's going to bring up a new window in which we can see what the physical device looks like, along with a config tab. And within this config tab, we have some global settings and then settings on the individual interfaces. And then we have the CLI, which is the command line interface. So usually when we're working on things, we're going to be going into the CLI, but let's just get accustomed to what the config does. So here on the top we have the global settings. So we have settings below that which have the display name, which doesn't have to be the same as the actual host name. Display name is what you'll see here. The host name is what will end up going into the iOS. So through networking, if you're using DNS or some kind of name resolution, it's the host name it would be using. We won't get into the algorithm settings. Down the road we're going to get into VLANs, but we'll definitely be doing that in the CLI. Here under the interface area, you can see in total there are 24 interfaces. If you look at the switch, it was a 2950-24. That indicates there's these 24 interfaces. These are all copper, fast Ethernet. Fast Ethernet meaning it either is 10 meg or 100 meg. If you click on them, you can see we can assign a VLAN, we can turn the port on or off, we can change the bandwidth and duplex from auto to 10 or 100. Not really a lot we can do. We can also change it from an access to trunk port. Now we haven't described access or trunk yet. We will in a later video. Alright, so we click on CLI. It brings us into the command line in which we can configure our switch. Now I want to hit Control Z. That's going to bring me out of that config. And I'm actually going to go ahead and type in exit. If I hit enter, we see down here switch with a greater than sign. Switch, if you call, was the host name. So the prompt will have the host name of the switch followed by, in this case, a greater than sign. That indicates you're in user exec mode. Through this you can do some commands to show things, but you really can't do anything to configure it. In order to configure a switch, you need to get into privilege exec, and we do that through the command enable. So we can type in the whole word enable, or just enough so that it knows the command we want to type is in enable. So if I just type in en and hit enter, it puts me into that privilege exec mode. If you look at the cursor, it changed from a greater than sign to a pound sign. That indicates we're in the privilege exec mode. Now anywhere in a Cisco device, if you don't know what to type in, you type in a question mark. It'll give you all possible commands that you can enter. As you can see, there's quite a bit. If we type in exit one more time, we could do that back here at the user exec. And you can see there's connect, disable, disconnect, enable. And since enable is the only thing that starts with an en, that's why we can just type in en and it knows what command we want to type. If we type in E and hit enter, it comes back with ambiguous command. because there's two items that start with an E, enable and exit. Now if we typed in L, since there's only one command that starts with an L, it knows, oh, this is log out. So when you're working on a switch and when I'm doing things, you won't see me type in enable, you'll see me type in EN. Because I want to type in as little as possible. So now we're in a mode that we can configure this switch. One of the first things I want to do, since this is what we call managed switch, which means it's a switch that I can get to, particularly from remote locations, and make changes in the configuration. I want to be able to get to this from over the network. I don't want to have to physically be at the device and connect to the device. So I want to give this device an IP address. So the way I want to do that is I want to give it an IP address to the VLAN interface. Now we haven't gone into VLANs, which stand for virtual LANs. We will eventually. But instead of giving it to an Ethernet port, management port, we're just going to go into the VLAN. So in order to configure the system, I need to go into a configure mode. So again, if I type in CONF and then a question mark, it's going to tell me all the different ways I can configure the system. So what is CNOF? Well, if we just type in question mark, let's go back. If we just type in a question mark, we can see the commands. CONF was for configure. Enter configuration mode. So conf T means configure from the terminal, what I'm typing at. So now I want to make it so I can get to the switch remotely through an IP address. So I'm going to go ahead and specify the interface, so INT, and if I hit tab, it'll complete the rest of that word. So remember, I said I want to configure VLAN 1. So I have interface VLAN 1. And notice there's spaces between these. I hit enter. And now if you look, it went from the config mode to config if. That's indicating I am in an interface configuration mode. Now, I want to assign this an IP address. I don't know how to do that. So what do? Put in a question mark. Gives me all the commands. If we look through them, what looks like something that would allow me to add an IP address? Well, that's pretty easy. I see one that says IP. So let's type in IP. A space. Let's put in a question mark and see what else we need to do. Next thing, IP address or IP helper address. Well, IP address sounds pretty good, so let's try that. Type in address. Another question mark. It gives me A.B.C.D with a description of IP address, or DHCP with a description of IP address negotiated with via DHCP. So the format it's giving it in is telling me how I need to enter this information in. So I want to give this an IP address of 192.168.1.254. Well, I could hit enter. Well, let's go ahead and hit enter. Let's see what happens. Incomplete command. So that's telling me I'm missing something. Hey, I don't know what I'm missing. So let me up arrow, which puts in the last command I entered. If I hit up arrow again, it does the same thing. So if you want to scroll through your previous commands, up arrow and down arrow. So again, not sure what I'm supposed to put after this. So space, question mark. It says, oh, you need to put in the IP subnet mask in the format of A.B.C.D. Again, class C, I'm going to put in 255.255.255.0. could hit enter. If I'm not sure, let's see. Question mark. Does it need anything after that? The only thing it has is less than CR greater than. What does that mean? It means carriage return. It means hit the enter key. So I will do that. When you hit the enter key and you get no response back, that means it accepted that command. So now this device has an IP address of 192.168.1.254. So from a remote device, I should be able to telnet to it. Telnet by default, and at some point we'll enable the secure shell, SSH. So let's click on PC0 and see if it works. I'm betting it's not going to, and we'll explain why if it doesn't. So here, and drag the wing over, and we said we're going to try pinging it. So ping 192.168.1.254. And doesn't look good. Looks like we get request timeout. Well, why is that? We configured the right IP. At least we thought so. Well, typical troubleshooting. Let's look for something else on that network, and let's see if we can ping it. We know we got a PC on that network. It's on the other side of that switch. Let's try that real quick. Yep, so it doesn't appear to be my host. So let's go take a look at what's wrong. And so I'm going to close this window out. Close this window out. Let's come back over to our switch. So what went wrong? Well, just as a little hint, let's go over to the config tab. Let's go to, do we have VM? Yep, right here. VLAN database. Well, here we can't see. Here we can see that ports, i.e. interfaces, can be on or off. Here it doesn't have that option. But if you go into the CLI, you can gain that option. So I need to go back into interface VLAN 1 to finish my configuration. Now, what I'm missing is that interface is in what we call shutdown state. So I need to say no shut for no shutdown. I hit enter, and I see my line protocol on interface VLAN 1 changed state to up. Now let's go back to that PC and see what happens. Let's hit our up arrow 2 times, hit enter, and let's see what happens. Quest timeout. But now we got pings. It's pretty normal to get that first request timeout, so don't worry about that. You may even get 2 of them. But after that, you'll start getting pings. And then subsequently, you'll start getting pings. Alright, so now we know we can get to the device over the network. Or at least at this point, we know we can ping it. So let's say we're setting up a device for the first time. And it's a real device, and it's not packet tracer. And we can't just click on it and bring up the CLI. Or let's say in a competition, this is all locked. How do we get to this device to configure it? Well, the traditional way is through the use of what's called a console cable. Console cable, if we go, remember, down here to the connections, and this blue cable, if we click on it, and when we hover over it, it was said console. We connect that to the RS-232, which is a serial port. And we connect it to the console port on the switch. Now at this point in time, if we click on our PC again, and now go into the terminal window, very similar to the old hyper terminal. First thing it asks us is for our basic configuration. this is correct. We click on OK, and look at what we got. We got that same configuration screen that we had when we were directly on the switch. So if we're in a situation where we need to configure a switch or router, whatever device, but through the competition it's locked down so that when you click on this, you don't get a CLI, you don't get a config, or if you get instructed to use a console cable, that's how you do it. Alright, so we saw some very basic configuration. We assigned an IP address to a VLAN, which allows us to, at this point, ping the device, will allow us to telnet into the device and SSH into the device. And then we showed a use of a console cable connected to the device in order to configure it. Alright, we'll get to some more in another video.